How you doing, folks? Well, you join me on another day in the garage, and today I am going to, by sheer determination, make sure I have the engine cranking over by the end of the day. So, first things first, let's get the flywheel sorted out, because I have the bolts, I have the flywheel, I have the clutch. Okay, so, starting at the beginning, obviously there's a certain way that the flywheel has to go on. Not only just because of timing marks, but also because of balance as well too. But you see, those two holes are actually closer together than all the others, and they go here in these holes here, right? So what I've done is, just for ease of identification when we were offering it up, I've actually marked them. I'm going to take two bolts out of the bag. I actually bought the bolts directly from Volkswagen, from the local Volkswagen dealership. It's the only parts I've actually bought from a VW dealership for this particular conversion. That's not to say that other parts aren't actually proper VW parts, but these are the only ones that are actually from VW themselves. So, there's one, there's two. So the flywheel is in position now. I'll give it a wipe off. I actually did wipe off the other side already off camera, but put all our bolts in place. Now, it's very, very important that these bolts are torqued correctly, okay? And the torque is 60 Newton meters plus 90 degrees of a turn. They are what are called stretch bolts. Okay, so what happens is essentially they stretch when you torque them. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll drive them home first of all with the impact gun, and then we'll torque them down. I'm going to put a light torque on it with the impact gun. I'm not going to go hard on it. But okay, so they're home now, but not torqued, obviously. Now, I've been thinking about a way to actually torque this, because obviously now the engine's going to want to turn when I torque it. But in order to stop that from happening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breaker bar on the nut on the pulley end on the other side, and brace that against the ground. I'll lower the engine down, and then as I'm pressing down on the torque wrench to torque these, I've been pressing down the breaker bar on the other end through the engine's crankshaft. Should work, so we'll get ourselves set up and see if we can get that to work. Okay, so it seems to be working for us, this method anyway. I have the breaker bar on the pulley nut, so because I'm tightening these bolts, the pulley is inclined to tighten as well too. But the torque on that would be a hell of a lot higher than it would be on these anyway, so it's not going to over tighten. So there's 60, 60, 60, 60, 60, and 60. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to back them off half a turn, and I'm going to go back onto 60. And the reason being is because of the fact that some of them clicked without moving, so they could have already been over torqued. So we need our starting point to actually be 60. So I'm only backing them off ever so slightly. So this way then when we pull it up to 60, we know we're getting 60 foot-pounds or 6 Newton meters on each one. I go foot-pounds because it's what I use at work. The aviation industry is imperial. It just takes a bit of getting used to when you start in the industry first of all, but you kind of get used to it quick enough. You sort of have to. Right, so now So let's get our torque done. Okay, so there's 60 on that one. 60 on that one. 60. Okay, so that's our preliminary torque set now. So now what we need to do is we need to actually set an angle torque, okay? So the way we do that is we turn each bolt 90 degrees, okay? So how we're going to set that is we're going to make a mark on the bolt versus the mark on the flywheel, okay? And you'll know you've turned 90 degrees by the movement of the torque wrench, but it's not the best way of doing it, to be honest with you. You're better off having a good reference that you can go off. And should we make some remarks if you're not as clear as you'd like. Okay, so now we need to pull these 90 degrees each, and again in the same way as I've done in the last torque, or the 60 newton meters of torque I put on, I'm going to go on opposite sides. Okay, so here, 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 and then here and here, and that means you're not going to warp anything by doing that. Now, the only other thing I would suggest as well too is that you don't use a torque wrench for pulling above the value you actually have set. Certainly not much above it. But what I do have is I have a piece of junk torque wrench which I can use for this, one that I wouldn't really trust for accurate work anyway. So I'll get that and we'll use that instead. Now, it looks like the same torque wrench, but it most certainly is not. This is a PowerFix Lidl special that I was given. So I'm going to wind it all the way up. It might not even click. So make it a little more. You can see this is where your mark comes in handy. Okay, that's that one done. To be honest with you, when you pull them up to 90 degrees like this, they really feel fully tight at that rate. Whereas at 60 foot or 60 newton meters, I'll eventually get it right. They don't. This one here. Okay, then we go this one here. Tiny bit more. And this one here. Right, So now let's have a closer look. Okay, 90, 90, 90, 90. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay, so that flywheel is now on. Technically speaking, if you were actually to take those bolts out now, you'd need to replace the bolts because they've been stretched now and they're single use only. So we won't have to take them back out. I sincerely hope we won't anyway. But I'm not going to put the clutch on just yet because I'm not going to be putting the gearbox on anyway yet. What I want to do is I want to get it to the point where we're actually ready to crank it over. So the next thing to do is I need to put turbo oil return on. I did get a new turbo oil return made. Many people on the very helpful internet sites and groups on Facebook and all that pointed out that the turbo oil return was not good enough and it was going to cause turbo problems, and I'm not much of a risk taker when it comes to things like this. So that's why I heeded their advice and I got a new return pipe made, which should keep the pipe a lot straighter. So that's what we'll put on next. So the turbo oil return goes from here down to here, and I have a gasket down there for it as well. So I will show you now what way the pipe looks. The way I did this is I reused the original flanged fitting, got a new pipe crimped on, and I have this contraption on the other end, and should give a nice straight line, or at least a lot closer to being a straight line, straight down to the sump. So let's get that all connected up. Okay, the turbo oil return is now on and it's grand. I think that does the job nicely anyway. It's looking pretty straight. It's a lot better than the other one was anyway, and it's a thicker pipe as well. It's more or less horizontal with the bottom of the engine, maybe a little bit down. I mean, I don't want to go try and bending that because what'll end up happening is it'll break. I might just try and bend it a little bit, but you know, at the moment, to be honest with you, I think this good as I'm going to get it. And you know, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like, I don't really think that's going to make a difference. I mean, that's quite a large bore pipe going right the way down to the sump. The turbo has every opportunity to drain properly there now. So yeah, we'll call it at that. So the next job is actually to put oil in the engine, and then we're going to set it up and crank it over. So let's get you guys stood back a bit, and let's see where we can. You can see me. Now, you'd think putting oil in this engine is a straightforward matter, but the thing about it is that if you go by the dipstick at the moment, A, the engine is hanging, you don't know whether it's hanging at the right angle, and B, it's going to be sitting over on its side, so we need to know how much oil is going into it. So it's going to get 4.5 litres, okay? So what we'll do is we'll get the oil that's in the boot of the Golf. I'll actually go out and get it now. I also bought some gearbox oil, so we'll top up the gearbox as well and put the last litre into it that I didn't get to put in before. And then we'll set up a starting motor and see how we get on. I must have been an absolute prick in my previous life because things just will not go right for me now. I have a battery connected up, right? Let's just disconnect that for a moment. Because I connected up the battery, I connected the starter up, and I went to spin it over. And the starter basically clicked in, I wouldn't click back again, and then I went to turn the engine over by hand, and it seems to me like the flywheel is actually rubbing on the back plate. Now, I don't understand why that would be. I mean, the flywheel is the bloody right part number for this engine. It's definitely right. It's fitted and everything. And I got it to crank over the briefest amount of time. I'll see if I can show you. You can see what I mean. See, it's not doing anything now, right? You know, granted, the jump leads are probably a bit crusty as well too. Okay. Bit of smoke. It's as if it's actually trying to start. It's not going to start. I mean, the injection pump isn't connected up. There's no electronics connected to this engine whatsoever. There's no diesel in it. And maybe if I spray a bit of contact cleaner down the throat of it, it might actually kick over. Just try a little bit of it. Okay, right, well at this point in time what I want to do now is I want to check and see if we're actually getting oil pressure. Because that's the next thing really that we need to be on the hunt for. So this is our oil pressure sender here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect I have a test lamp, and I could just connect up the test lamp and see if we're getting any pressure. This little piece of gear here I'm about to show you is just brilliant. This is called an auto test probe. Okay, and what happens is you can connect two wires to your battery, okay, and it can be used to test and see if you have power on a circuit. You can test and see if it's grounded, or you can put power on it yourself by pressing the plus or minus button. Okay, so if I press this, that means that you're putting power onto the tip here, and if you press it down, you're grounding out the tip. Okay, and you can also there's a little light on it as well too, which is kind of cool. It's not the brightest thing in the world, but it's helpful. So I could actually use it for grounding out the or for putting power onto the solenoid for the start motor instead of the wire I have here. I'm not going to though. So green, because I'm getting the green light on that means it's negative, okay? So that's grounded. So what we'll do is, when we crank over this engine, that should stop beeping when we crank it for a bit. It did. Although it happened instantaneously, so I'm wondering is the starter robbing power from the probe. And check there's another oil pressure connection down here. That one doesn't seem to be working actually. Right. Okay, so it's cranking over now. So maybe we're getting there. I still don't trust that auto test probe actually in this instance, simply because of the fact that I think what's happening is the engine's drawing too much current from the battery and it's actually just taking the power away from this and it's not working. So we'll do it the old fashioned method. Instead of a bulb and a wire, a standalone object, like a little piece of crap multimeter I had knocking around the bottom of my toolbox. So what we'll do is we'll set this to resistance, okay? So this should be zero resistance between the block and the wedge shot in there. Okay, so that's open circuit now, okay, or short circuit. So we're actually getting 1 ohm. So what we're looking for here is we're looking for that circuit to open up, okay? So let's do that now. It's not cranking very fast, so it might take a bit of time. Okay, right. So that's enough cranking there for the moment. Anyway, let's take out that pressure probe and actually see if we're getting oil up to there. The oil should spill out. A little bit of oil should pour out of here now. No. There's no oil up in the head. Right, let's just try cranking again until we get a bit. Right. I wonder is it just cranking too slow or the oil pump needs priming or something like that. Okay, so I've been doing a bit of thinking. Obviously the reason I'm not getting oil flow is because of the fact that I need to prime the oil pump. Now, had I known this when the timing belt was off, I could have spun the intermediate shafts with a drill and gotten oil up through the engine that way, but there was no oil in the engine at that stage. I still haven't got the turbo oil return. The timing belt is now on. I'm not taking it back off again. I just don't have to bother. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the vacuum pump out. And when you take the vacuum pump out, the oil pump is actually driven off the other side of the vacuum pump. So what I can do is get some sort of a rod with a slot in it or something like that to reach down and grab the top of the oil pump and spin it over with a drill. So it's the only thing I can think of doing. So if anybody has any better suggestions, I would appreciate them at this point in time. The other thing I was thinking was maybe trying to pump some oil from an oil can through the galleries from where the oil pressure switch goes, using a little squirty oil can. You know, that might or might not work. I don't know, to be honest with you. But yeah, either way, I don't want to crank it over anymore. I think beyond this point I'm going to end up just doing harm to something or other. So a bit of thinking required. I'm going to call it at this point now for the moment. At least I have it cranking over. I've got oil in the engine, and I'm going off out to meet some of the guys from Air-Cooled, which is the VW club that I'm in. One of the VW clubs I'm in. So yeah, I'll take a few photos from that and stick them up as well too. Thanks. Okay, folks, I'm picking this video back up on the following day, rather than making it into two separate videos. Let's just go from here. Now, what I've done is I've taken out the vacuum pump. Unfortunately, there's a bit of dirt behind it, which I want to try and remove without it dropping into the crankcase. So let's just remove that there. A little bit of leaves and stuff like that. So what you can see, if you look down here, I'll turn on the light on the camera. There we go. What you're looking at there, the little drive dog, is the top of the oil pump. Okay. Now, what I have done is I've made up a tool for actually turning that with the drill, and then that's going to give us the oil pressure, right? So the tool is basically this lad here. The bolt, which I've ground down the hexes on and cut a slot in the top. It's quite a long bolt, see? So what I can do now is I can actually put that bolt into the drill, and that will just go down over the drive dog of the oil pump, like so. You can see now I'm now turning the oil pump with the bolt. So what I will need is an extension, but what I can do is, by way of an extension, I can put a couple of nuts on the bolt and use the drill with the socket adapter on it. And that should do us. So we need to spin that quickly in a clockwise direction. So let's try doing that. I know it's kind of hard for you to see what I'm doing here, but actually what I did was the little drive adapter kept on slipping off the side of the drive dog on the top of the lube module. The lube module, that's what they're called in jet engines. Oil pump. And so what I did was I actually got a socket that it would go up into, that would go down over the shaft comfortably. And so I can put the slot on the drive dog and put the socket down over it, and that keeps it where it needs to be. So now I have a drill with an adapter on. Now what I'm hoping to see when I spin this is oil coming out of the port and the head here, which you guys can have a look at as well too. So we'll be back and we'll give it a spin. That's working a treat now. Feels like it's doing something now anyway. Oh, okay. We're getting oil up out of the turbo oil supply now. My infinite wisdom, I took that pipe off to get access. Not my brightest move. Ooh, that's disgusting sludgy oil coming out of here as well too. So I think what we'll be doing is we'll be flushing this oil out as soon as we get the engine running. Let's get a spanner and just tighten that up. Okay, right, now let's try that again. So we were getting there anyway. We were actually getting oil up out of the port. What we need to do is we need to get it from the head. That's where I want to see the oil come from. Oh, there we go. Happy days. Okay, as I said, it's really disgusting looking oil, but what I'm thinking I might do is I might actually just pump through a bit and get a bit of oil out from through the channels in the engine and actually get that running a little bit cleaner, because there's clean oil in the sump. Let's get that up a bit. I think it would be fair to say that nobody really likes working on the really oily bits of diesel engines. The oil is always just disgusting and full of carbon and crap, and to be honest with you, it just doesn't come off your hands. The gloves are definitely a lifesaver. Apart from the fact that there's things in oil that is carcinogenic and you don't want to be getting it on you if you can avoid it. But anyway, the upshot of it all is that worked a treat, that trick with the bolt with the slot cutting it. So we now have oil up to the head. We've been pumped around the engine, and I put the sensor back in and I pumped it some more, so I turned the engine over a good bit. So that means that everything in this engine is now lubricated where it needs to be. Like, as I pumped it, the resistance on the drill got higher, so that was telling me that it was doing its job. So okay, so things are looking a bit more positive now today. So this is how we're looking. Crank it over lovely now. Okay, now I'm starting to get a bit happier about this. So next thing I want to do is just make sure, I suppose I should have checked this before cranking it for so long, to make sure there's definitely oil pressure here. There should be at this point. So let's break out shitmultimeter.com. So I'm just try that up there, and what we're doing basically is, the way these oil switches work is they when the switch is closed, it grounds out and you get your oil light on, so the switch is normally closed. But when you're actually getting oil pressure, the switch opens. So right now I have it's entirely possible I actually have oil pressure still remaining. No, there we go. Okay. I didn't think it was going to be hanging on that long. Right, so let's do a bit more cranking. So now I have 0.6 ohms, right, which is basically closed. So the switch is now closed. So what we want to do is see if that switch opens when I crank it for a bit. Yes! And after a few seconds that'll come back on. So we want to take a bit of time for it to come back. Yeah, it's taking its sweet time, which is kind of good actually. So it means it's holding its oil pressure really well. What I was looking for there as well too was to make sure that the oil pump was actually being turned by the opposite side of the vacuum pump, and that it was all in the right position and that, and it seems to be. Okay. There we go. Right, so it's taking a lot of time to come back. I will just check it again. Crank it over. Yeah, there we go. Right, okay, so we're getting oil pressure, so that's the first major hurdle now in starting this engine. And you see, it's very important you check these things before you just go and try and start it, you know. I mean, if you didn't have oil pressure, you spooled it up, as we say in the aircraft world, you're going to have a bad time. So, anyway, so let's just pop that back on. That's our spade connector onto the oil pressure switch. And that's a job is a good one. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and start connecting some of the wiring harness and see how we get on with that. And then we'll start moving on to other things. But for the moment, let's just disconnect our battery supply.